So today, I want you all to experience what it is to be an IPFS gateway and how content routing feels from the IPFS gateway perspective. So it's going to be somehow an interactive talk. The only thing you will have to do is just raise your hand when there's a question and you have the answer. So on that, briefly who I am. I think I have the same problem as previous speakers. Emojis are not displaying, but that's another issue. So I'm a research engineer at Cloudflare. I'm working on IPFS, Ethereum, and all the distributed systems. And yeah, I like croissant, not the brioche croissant in Portugal, even though they are good. More like the French croissant with puffed pastry. So today I will talk about first the content routing live experience, where you will feel content routing after all the technical talks that happened. Then I will explain why gateways are special, and I don't want to say the snowflake, they're special. And then finally, the challenge that lies ahead in terms of gateways. So this is a slide. There's a lot of things on it. For those that are able to see the jaw count, can you raise your hand? So we have 1 people, 2 people. That's not much. So you see content routing is already difficult. Are you able to see the Indian flag? Who's able to see the Indian flag? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay, so we have some people. So for those that have seen the Indian flag, could you please re-raise your hand? Okay, we'll take, so Guillaume, I think. Can you tell me where the Indian flag is? And I will use, okay, the pointer is useless, but can you tell me? So top of the lower half. Okay. Okay, I think I see it. So yeah, we've just performed content routing. I didn't know where a thing is. I just asked a lot of people. I received multiple answers after querying a lot of people. And yeah, I got an answer for content. If we want to put IPFS term on that, yeah, I was a gateway, so I received some requests from the slides, and I was just advertising to you all which content, and you were my IPFS peers. Finally, we had the provider, which was the picture, and it's Reddit Places from 2017, which is an online experience that happened. So yeah, question is, gateways are special somehow. So as you've seen, I had an arbitrary content request that wanted to explore the whole pictures, which we consider all data stored on IPFS. And the question is, from these arbitrary requests, I wanted to quickly be able to serve it and provide it to whoever. And that's kind of make gateway special compared to people that already know who they would contact and which peer in the DHT they will have. And there are some challenges for that. So gateway, in a way, and I will use the kind of torrenting term, are leecher nodes. Really, they will query a lot of peers because they would have a lot of requests for arbitrary content and arbitrary data. These requests, they will be cached, usually through HTTP or through a custom cache to the next time the gateway gets asked for the request, they're able to serve it fast. And by doing that, they're removing load from the network, which is good. You have less load on the network. At the same time, that means you have less visibility, and sometimes that could be tricky to understand if your content should stay around because it's being used and served by a gateway. Gateways don't provide any hosting, or at least the 2 most popular gateway that we know of. And so by not providing hosting, if we still doing the torrenting analogy, they have a very bad ratio because they're just getting data and they're never providing it back. And that makes them tricky, even though they have, for most of the content, a very crucial role to make accessible content accessible, IPFS content accessible. And finally, there's little participation in content routing, even though it's not that true for IPFS.io or Protocol Lab or Cloudflare. There's no easy link between the content and the request being made by the gateway and their participation in content routing. Because they would need an easy way to identify that requests come from a specific gateway and actually the content could be fetched back and answered back. And so once we have all these problems, the question is like, what's next? Like, what improvement could we do, and what should we like consider so that like there's like a better content routing from everyone from a gateway perspective? So first of all, you've heard all I think in a lot of talk these mornings. The setup of like gateways and indexes together is definitely a good combination, because like the gateway will like query a lot of content from the DHT, from like the peers that they have, and they could just populate directly an indexer to make that content available back. Then you could have like the main issue is, as you've seen with like the Indian flag or like the Yukon, sometimes no one is advertising where content is, and so it can be very tricky to find who has it. And so the providers of the data should really advertise the content they have. Should it be on the DHT? Should it be via like BitSwap, or should it be via QR code? I think there's a presentation about like having QR code. But like really, you should advertise the content. Otherwise, the public network is not able to access it. And on a similar note, sometimes you don't want really to advertise content because there's no good access control for IPFS. So maybe there's some data that you only want to provide to certain of your peers. And so that's something like you should be able to do. That's a policy you define to who accesses your content. And so kind of thinking which are the peers that like could access your content is something which is like very correlated with like how you could find the content. And finally, some kind of like peer reputation may be like an area to explore, even though what this would look like is tricky. As we've mentioned, like gateway in the most common like imagined peer reputation system would likely have a very bad reputation and like preventing them from like accessing content. And that's it. Thank you.